Hello, everyone. Welcome to our gaming pod. Today we're talking about avoiding long and complicated games in your collection. And I'll put a link below, but my feeling on games is that I rather have quality over quantity, and the meaning that also it helps with when you have limited funds because a smaller collection means less money being spent. Now, each of my games also has a specific, let's say, reason to be in the collection. Like example, Carcassonne is the lighter game, and Pandemic is for introductory games, and for me my complicated game is and long game is Guns of Gettysburg. Alright, now I'll put a link below to that entire conversation. But in keeping with that, recently what happened was I noticed that a lot of times these big complicated games just don't have that bang for your buck. To give you an example, recently between the choice of buying a long, complicated war game and Neuroshima Hex, I bought Neuroshima Hex and I don't regret it at all. Since the date of this recording, which is the 14th of May, I've already played, and I already had Neuroshima Hex for about 2 months. I already played it over 30 times. Whereas I've had Guns of Gettysburg for over 6 to 8 months, I only played it twice. And the reason why and all everything is because of the reasons I give below, so I'll get to that. And in preface, I also like to say that I'm not putting down big complicated games, and of course most of these are also war games. In fact, I'll let you know that my favorite games are war games. But the problem is, like I say, the equation that I have when I get a game is time spent playing is to cost plus space. Alright, and just like the example I give with Neuroshima Hex and another complicated war game, alright, most of the time these big complicated games like even like 18xx and everything, they take up a lot of space because naturally more complicated games mean more rulebooks, more pieces and everything like that, especially with nowadays quality has gone up so high, it's usually as miniatures. Alright, so meaning they take more space on your shelf and less time being played. And they're harder to table too, for all the reasons again I'll get to below. Whereas if you got a game that sets up fast, is played fast, and it gives you that feeling of satisfaction when you're done, you just invariably find yourself playing it a lot more, and it's just feels so much more worth the money. That unlike like I know several people who bought games, like they would say like how long you had the game. It's like literally ranging from games like 5 years to 20 years, which is the first time they opened it when I saw it. Like recently I played a game of Inca, and that was the case. I think it was like over 2-3 years old. That was the first time he ever opened the game, other than to open it and count the pieces before. Now that being said, this doesn't apply to everybody, of course, because I actually know a person called David Buckland in Singapore, who he has a whole room dedicated to big war games, and he has 5 tables laid out, and people just continuously come in to play day by day, and he also puts time to also, most importantly, learn the rules and check on the mistakes of his rules. So people like him, it's worth it because, like I said, they got the space and the cost issue covered. And that's also why I advocate that maybe instead of getting the longer complicated war games, you get games that are they have, like for me example, Command Colors Ancients was wonderful, especially when I decided not to put each of the blocks. I would use pieces to represent instead of putting 4 blocks, having to find for the same blocks. I just put 1 block and 3 more random things like a dice or whatever, and it really speeds up play. And now I play it so much. Now I almost completed 2 expansions plus the base game, so that's I think like 50 battles or something like that. So also, not to say I'm not bashing war games, but maybe get those that are shorter to play but still give you that satisfaction. So with that, let's first go into one of the reasons to consider why you might not want to get these long complicated games in your collection. First thing, the time factor. On top of being very complicated to learn, alright, these games also have another issue which most people that buy them don't consider. They take really long to set up. Alright, if you ever try to set up, especially by yourself, Twilight Imperium 3, Axis and Allies, or even like Samurai Battles, alright, because each Samurai Battles, the game doesn't take that long, but the setup, my lord, because imagine if you had painted each of the miniatures, and each of them have this weird pose, which when you pick up, they knock into each other and everything. it takes so long to set up and of course put them away, meaning that not only are you taking much time just to play the game, you can't even say like the game takes 8 hours. The takeaway probably takes another 1.5 hours or an hour depending on the game. So again, that's another setback which people go, man, I'm not that keen to try it due to the time allotment. The other thing is rules, like I said before. Many of these games are very dense. Alright, they're very hard to learn. And on top of that, like Guns Together is a huge criminal on this. There are rules between rules. And of course these rules give a lot of theme to the game and everything, but like I said, the first time you play a game, invariably you're probably going to play it completely wrong. Like Successors, I had to play it 2 to 3 times before we remembered to have the militia rule where you control local area. In fact, I have a book where I wrote down all the easily forgettable rules, and that in itself, I had to go through line by line to write down stuff. Alright, take a long time itself. So the time investment just to learn the game properly is already really hard. And on top of that, even if you try very hard, the time you take when you know, like let's say if you have a Euro game, you want to check a rule, it's 4 pages. You look over, there's the rule. With these games, not only do you have to look, like example, retreat. In between retreat, let's say you're retreating past a mountain pass, does that have any implications? Then you have to check through that. And most of the time, like I've learned, and I'm used to make this mistake, I used to just read that small passage, but then I'll get it wrong. But then the person taught me, one person, very nice person called Boone, taught me that you better read the whole passage, because actually they don't just say one thing in one passage, the bottom might have something, which actually was true twice. And on the last point of also just to add on to the packing up thing, for us war gamers and everything, also not only do you, like Hoplite, if you have the game, if I had it, I would actually not only separate them by polis, it means like Thebans and Athens and Spartans and all that, I would then divide them also then by the kind of arms they have, like bows, like pike, phalanx and all that. So again, you can imagine that adds to packing time again. And so to follow that up, the other thing is so-called the space. Now, I love Warhammer 40,000. Alright, and the issue that I would never get the game, Fantasy Flight's Horus Heresy, because even though it is at its base cost is quite expensive, but I know you can get it cheaper some other places. And of course, it's coffin box size. It's very big. It's really cool game, but the thing is that on top of the limitation that it's not a game, like I said, the problem with these longer complicated games, when I say longer, it means they usually take about 3 hours plus to play. It takes a certain kind of group to want to play them. On top of that, it's the people who want to take the time to actually enjoy the game, but we'll get to that later. But when so it takes a big space on your wall, and then here's the thing: when you get it, for people who are again war gamers and everything, because you see, when you separate everything, it makes it easier to play the game too. You don't have to keep searching through all the pieces. For me, invariably, I'll put them to Plano boxes and everything, especially the miniatures. But what that also does is also, like I said, when you put it away and everything, you separate everything again. And now that you moved everything to Plano boxes, it won't fit in the box. So now it not needed to you keep the box. Most of the time, let's be honest, we keep the box. You have to find a place for the Plano boxes, which take even more space. So even though you're cutting down time, you're losing in space. So the equation, like I said, remember, you got time spent playing to cost and space. You're losing in it usually in one case or the other. And the last and most important reason I feel is finding the players. Like I said, these games, complicated and longer games, usually have very specific players who want to play them. Alright, they're not going to find a large audience. They usually also have another trait. And this doesn't apply to everybody, but from personal experience, I know there are some people who are extremely adamant of playing these games at specific member counts. I mean, specific player counts, meaning like Twilight Imperium must be 6 players, Rex must be 5 players, and the problem, can you find the players who are willing to play? Not only that, even when you do find the players, are they the people that kind of, help the game along? Like, some people just get caught up in it accidentally, like in a meta or whatever. Sometimes, imagine you ask someone to play Twilight Imperium and the only game he played before was like, let's say Small World, he'd be completely lost, and the problem is he can't even leave halfway through. And on top of that, if you find someone on random, if you don't enjoy their company, you're stuck with them a very very long time. Like I was with Twilight Imperium 3, of which I'll get to that story soon with Terrible Tales of Gaming Horror, of which strangely I liked everybody except one guy, but you know, that will be in that story. And on top of that, you know, let's be honest, it does get tiring to explain the rules from the start every single time you play. Like Twilight Imperium 3, every single time there's a new player, you have to explain everything. And you know, it's like one time one person turned out and said he watched a half an hour video on Twilight Imperium 3, the Tom Vassal one. Or which, let's be honest, you're not going to learn Twilight Imperium 3 through that. Oh, but there is a 2-hour video which does give you the basis of the game really well. I'll put a link below to his site. Please do support him. And the last thing also is, as many of these players will know, it gets really stressful to play these games, and it depends on the player, but if you're a good host, it gets very, very hard not to try to bash on the new player. So, you know, not only are you watching them and trying to say, like, you know, give them tips, and here's the thing, you don't want to try to give them too many tips, because then you look like you're leading them. But at the same time, you cannot just take advantage of their mistakes, because invariably you're just better at the game, you played it more. And so, you know, you're never able to delve deeper into the game, of which these games usually do seriously get much more fun when you get into the strategy. Like when I play Successes now, I have an extremely good time, more than when I first played it, because I understand how everything works and everything like that. So in conclusion, you know, I'm not saying don't buy these games. If you like these games, please go ahead. But the thing is that, like I say, for bang for your buck, I found recently that it's just really not worth it. You know, like, you know, get a few that fill that slot, you know. But most of the time I feel these games are, for the money and everything spent with these games, it's usually better to buy something that you know you will table more often. So, thank you very much. Till next word.